Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. Way back in episode 43 of this podcast series, that's 40 episodes ago, I introduced you to a pharmacist turned brewer. Colin Porozni talked about his career transition from filling out prescription meds to serving up the best beer in the Lakeland. Nobody's proven me wrong just yet. So since that episode, I've had the idea to bring Colin back on the show because I love beer. And over the last, 6.5 years that Lakeland Brewing Company has been in operation, Colin has brewed, we're counting almost 30 different beers, along with a couple of seltzers and an iced tea that has become one of the biggest summer hits. All of these tasty beverages have some great names and great stories behind them, and that's actually the real motivation behind this episode. So thank you once again for someone completely interesting, Colin Porozni, back on the show. Welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Ben.
So there is on at the Lakeland Brewing Company here, what are there, 6 main taps up front?
Correct.
And 5 of those taps are 100%
They
day in and day out.
exactly,
They stay the same, and one tap changes out seasonally.
Yeah.
And the names all have some interesting backgrounds. So why don't we start with the top 6 up front? When I first started coming in here, never had craft beer before, and the best way to start out with was the blonde ale, the Frigid Gypsy. Where does that name come from?
Well, before we get to that, I was thinking about this when you approached me. The names themselves in general, there's quite often they're my wife comes up with a lot of the names.
Okay.
A lot of times I'll just be lying in bed and I'll wake up and literally on my phone I have about 100 names on my phone that if there's something that comes to mind or it rings off the tongue well or it brings back a fond memory of the past. My brain is constantly working on these names. The odd one gets suggested by a customer,
Right.
and then just little snippets from the past. So. Sorry, getting back to tap number 1, the Frigid Gypsy Blonde Ale. That is one that Tanya came up with.
Right.
I have Romanian heritage, so that's where the gypsy part comes from.
Okay.
I have no idea where she gets the word frigid from because I feel that I'm far from being frigid, but that's I guess you have to ask her that.
Well, I was thinking maybe because you serve it up cold, right?
That's probably why. Yeah.
All right. Tap number 2, I think, is kind of a sentimental one for you. That's the red ale.
Though the amber ale,
the amber ale, the Jaybird.
Jaybird amber ale. Yeah, it certainly does have a special place. A good friend of mine, while we were planning and building this brewery, passed away from cancer. Jay Evans, and his nickname to a lot of people was always Jaybird. So I thought, we might as well have a piece of him here with us while we're enjoying the beer. So
absolutely, and I think there's a little picture of him in the golf simulator.
There certainly
is
too. There certainly is, because he would be in there day in and day out.
Right. Number 3, my personal favorite when I come in here, Power Failure. Yeah, that's the IPA.
Yeah, so that's one beer that while I was brewing it, I still didn't have a name for it. Normally, I have a name long before I brew the beer because I have to actually submit it to AGLC to get the name approved and all the specs like that. So this was the one time where I didn't have a name for my IPA. It was early on. It was a hot day in June, back I guess 6 years ago now, and I was actually brewing, and I had the back garage door open because it was really hot and muggy, and started to rain a little bit. I was about halfway through the brewing process, a little bit of thunderstorm, and all of a sudden lightning strikes I'm not an electrician, so I don't know the term. Whatever the transmission,
the power box.
The box, yeah, the thing on the power pole, and it literally explodes. And there's debris. The shrapnel flies into the brewery. Wow. Everything, lights go out. And fortunately, it happened at a time in the brewing process where it wasn't a big deal. The power's off for an hour, so I didn't have to restart the batch. Sure enough, I kept checking back and forth. The power came on an hour later, and I got back to brewing, and I had a name for my IPA. So
sometimes just comes by chance.
Exactly.
Number 4 on your permanent taps.
The most boring name in craft beer history. And
you mailed that one in.
Yeah, year in and year out. I've been thinking about changing it, but never gotten around to it. No, it's a brown ale.
Yep.
We have some honey from Elk Point, and So we call it Honey Brown Ale. Yeah, yeah. Gold medal for originality.
There you go. But one of the more popular beers too.
It certainly is. Yeah, yeah.
And I've even brought it as a gift to some of my guests because it features the Lakeland Brewing Company, which I've had on the episode before. And sorry, and the name escapes me, and I apologize.
Stephen Lind. It took me a while to think of it too.
Stephen Lind, but his company is Northern. Is it Northern Lights Honey?
Northern Lights Honey.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we give him the correct credit he deserves for that. Yeah. So, and that's always the fun part too. Is there's always been a lot of local ingredients in some of the beers, and we'll get to that a little bit later here too. So, number 5, an interesting one because. There's been, I think, some discrepancy between what you tell me who named it and who actually came up with the name. I'll give a plug out there. Justin Anderson claims to be responsible for this one. That's the East Coast Hobbit.
And he is correct. You are correct there. Yeah, yeah. No, he calls himself the East Coast Hobbit. Okay. You know, he kind of looks a little bit hobbitish.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the name just kind of caught, and I was brewing a rye ale, and I don't know. He was in here and we were talking about something, and
right.
You know, that's just one of those terms that, you know, that sounds like a good name for a beer. So
because there are some that have disputed that he came up with it, but he did in fact come up with it.
He did. Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. Number 6 on the permanent taps. This one interchanges seasonally.
Correct.
So right now we're into the nice winter weather.
Yep.
Which settles in with a nice porter.
Yep.
And you came up with this one's a little bit nostalgic for me.
Well, you know what, and for you and anybody who might have watched CTV and television in probably the late 70s to late 80s there, and you know, I'm going to sing the song. I don't sing, but I'm going to sing the song for you.
Please do.
And if you've heard it, it's going to be stuck in your head for the rest of the day. There's a place keeps on calling me. After all, that's where I'll always be. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, you're actually a really good singer, Colin.
I'm not in the shower.
Yeah, there you go. I wouldn't, don't give up on that. Maybe when we'll have the live performance, it'll be the owner himself here. So it is the Littlest Hobo Porter.
Yeah.
And then going back, this was a fun one for me because every time I bought a growler of this, the Oilers would beat the Calgary Flames in the playoffs. And so there was 4 consecutive growlers, and then the fun ended with Colorado. But it's the 4-day work week.
I'm sorry, Ben. I'm gonna just switch it back because I have another interesting story about the porter.
Yes.
And I see you've got an Oilers hat on. I know you're an Oilers fan. This is a little bit of trivia. And I know you're also a trivia guy too.
Okay, I can be.
And the only reason I know this is when we launched the porter here again a few weeks ago, and somebody replied to my tweet. Jay Woodcroft, the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers, was a child actor. And he appears as about a 5-year-old in an episode of The Littlest Hobo Porter.
No kidding.
Yeah. So you have to Google it. And I didn't believe it until I actually Googled it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, there's a connection there. Sorry for that interjection.
No, that's okay. This is actually your episode at the end of the day. So anytime you want to step in and add to it, because that's what makes all of these fun for sure. And then, like I said, when we go back to the warmer weather, tap number 6 switches to the 4-day work week.
Correct, the Hefeweizen,
yeah. Was it just because, getting into the lazy days of, spring and summer, were people like maybe calling sick an extra Friday to get the weekend going early, or?
No, I had there's a group of firemen, volunteer firemen here who come in quite often, and they were we got talking about I don't want to say the person because they'll be upset because we were basically calling him lazy, but they dubbed him as the king of the 4-day work week. So, and it kind of stuck. And again, that was one of those terms that, hey, that's not a bad name for a beer. Wow. And there was a time here a little while ago where there was a few governments around the world that were touting a 4-day work week.
Right.
So I thought I was onto something there, but it kind of fizzled out.
Still might be. We'll revisit that when it comes back on tap, I guess. So, so outside of that, you have a couple of taps that interchange with. I'm counting 17 different brews here that have been kind of the one and done.
Oh yes, the one. Exactly. Yeah.
Some phenomenal names, and some I wish you would bring back, to be honest, because between the name and I actually did really like them. So if you had like a couple on the list that were your favorite for one reason or another, what would a couple of those ones be?
Oh boy, I'm going to think back here and look at my classy Freddie Blassie.
Okay,
the Golden Ale.
Yeah.
Again, that's from my wife Tanya.
Okay.
Yeah, and she wasn't a wrestling fan, but I watched a lot of wrestling in my younger days, and he was a wrestling manager, and prior to that, a wrestler too. But it seems like whenever I happen to walk out of the closet dressed nicely, that's her term, classy Freddie Blassie. So again, one of those names is just stuck in my head, and we had to put it on a beer.
That one absolutely was a good one too for the Golden Ale. Fun one where the label features your son in a nice hat attire. The Pastafarian Pale Ale.
Pastafarian Pale Ale. Yeah, he actually. Well, I guess for some of your listeners who don't know about Pastafarianism, they can look it up later. But he actually went when he turned 16 to get his driver's license with a spaghetti colander on his head, and they refused him. And legally, because it is a registered religion, they shouldn't have refused him. But
right.
He didn't push hard enough, which is probably a good thing, because in the end, I don't think he wanted to have a pasta colander on his head either. But yeah, so that's just Pastafarian Pale Ale. A little bit of maybe alliteration there. It rolls off the tongue well.
When you guys were promoting it, you actually had spaghetti strainers for
we did.
sale as
we
well.
did. We gave away some spaghetti strainers here. Yeah.
Gave them away or sold a few?
No, we gave them away.
Okay.
You got gift with purchase. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Some brilliant marketing strategies going on here as well. One that I really liked way back when, and I didn't know that this was an actual type of beer till I was actually reading up. I thought you just made the whole name up altogether, but I fancy myself as one of those weird uncles, and you had the one called the Weird Uncle Dunkel, and Dunkel is a type
German,
of ale.
type of German dark lager. Yeah,
right. Okay.
Yeah. No, it was a good beer. I think I get asked for it to do it again a lot, but it's a long process too.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. But why the Weird Uncle on the...
You know what? I just needed to find something that went with Dunkel. And again, I think that was one of those ones where I woke up in the middle of the night and Weird Uncle Dunkel came to my head. So
probably suits a lot of people that enjoyed it as well, including myself.
And I was in... that's a funny thing about that. I mentioned the AGLC getting the names approved. Mm-hmm. I thought that one might not get approved.
Oh.
Just, there's... Actually, I think I might have even, if I remember correctly, I might have... initially submitted as creepy uncle, and maybe they did. They might have actually rejected it, so I had to go to Weird Uncle. But I was in. There's actually a brewery in BC that had just recently they launched a Dunkel, and they called it Weird Uncle Dunkel as well.
Okay.
So whether they're as creative as me or they copied me, I'm not sure. So,
is there any copyright to stuff like that?
No, as you can see, some of the images that we use, we're
enough.
probably infringing on copyrights as well.
Okay,
so let's not bring that up.
So no, okay, we won't rock the boat on it too. This one here, between the name and I think he had a great story behind it too. But one I'd be okay if he never brought back. It was not one of my favorites, which out of all of them, I think this is the only one that I didn't really like. It was the Diving Moose.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So tell us about that. Because it was quite a bit of a different process too.
It was we used a high temperature, ultra fast yeast from Norway. It's called a Kvik yeast. And the beer's done in 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
It kicks off a whole bunch of different esters, which give you aroma and different things like that. And yeah, it was a unique beer. We'll put it that way. I wanted to try it. Tried it once. I know it didn't fly out the door for sure.
There was some people that really liked it.
Yeah,
and
that's the way it is. It's either you love it or hate it. I'm surprised because I've never seen you hate a beer before, Ben.
I was surprised too. I mean, I think if you did bring it back, I would have to try it one more time just to make sure. Mm-hmm. But I guess that's up to you if you bring it back or not. But it was, but I have to be honest. Like I said, I've loved pretty much every beer I've put down my gullet here in this place, and this one I had one, and I was politely said no, thank you to the next one.
Well, you didn't like the beer, but I think you're gonna get a kick out of the origination of the story.
That's my next question.
Of the label here. Yeah. So there's 6 of us guys, all originally from St. Paul here. Some of them. Mm-hmm. One from Vancouver, one from Dallas, Texas. We met in Yellowknife to go fishing.
Right.
And went with a friend of a friend, and we take this boat, about a 5-hour boat ride, and we end up on this island in the middle of Great Slave Lake for 4 or 5 days, and it's freezing cold weather, and the fishing's decent, but we have a lot of time sitting around the fire BSing. And I won't mention who, but he still lives in St. Paul here, and he's a salesman at Agland. He out of the blue, he just spouts out that moose can dive 100 feet. And we're like, what? He says, yeah, moose can swim, like they dive under the water 100 feet.
Right.
And we're like, okay. So we had no Wi-Fi there, no internet, because we were in the middle of nowhere. So,
right.
Again, you're away for 4 or 5 days. Most of these guys have wives and kids. What's the first thing that everybody did when they got back to as close enough to the city of Yellowknife where we had an internet connection? They're all Googling how far can moose dive. Nobody was contacting anybody. So it turns out moose will dive sometimes 10 feet below the water to eat vegetation. Not 100 feet as this gentleman proclaimed. And somehow there's on the internet there's a picture of this moose diving off a cliff, whether it's been doctored or not. But so that was the kind of the basis for that. Which reminds me, the gentleman who proclaimed this fact, he made some pretty hefty bets on that on that fishing trip, and I don't think he's paid up yet.
I think I know exactly who you're talking about.
He drives a white Agland Dodge truck.
There you go. Yeah, okay. I've definitely seen him around town. You don't make a lot of the lagers and the pilsners, but a couple that have popped up. One I really enjoyed was the Pill Counter Pilsner. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine how that name came about. We talked a little bit about it in the intro here.
Well, my dad, who was a pharmacist as well before me, he's helped out a lot in the brewing here, in the process of getting this place started. Mm-hmm. And I call him my vice president of distribution because he does beer runs at least once or twice a month to Bonnyville and Cold Lake. And I wanted to somehow involve him in a label. So this is one of those ones where everything started with a picture. And this is a picture of him and I. Actually, and Greg Rosell, who's got the Value Drug Mart in town here. We had to crop Greg out of the picture. It didn't fit on the label. But a picture of us, and this is like almost 35 years ago, in the pharmacy with our fancy white jackets on. And so that was kind of the basis for it. And I'm going to brew a beer, and we're going to have this label on it. And then what type of beer did I brew? And I'm looking, okay, maybe we'll do a Pilsner. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what can we come up with a label? Oh, we were pharmacists. People used to call me Pill Counter all the time. Well, yeah. So there you go, Pill Counter Pilsner. So
easy.
Yeah.
Do you ever have the beer in mind when you come up with the names? I just thought of this question here off the top of my head, because you said you get names. You've got a phone full of hundreds of names for beers. But
it's funny you say that, because I was just thinking about that when I had the name Landing Pad Lager in my head probably 20 years ago.
Okay.
When I was still doing the little bit of home brewing at home, and I thought someday if I'll ever open up a brewery, my flagship beer will be Landing Pad Lager. So it was going to be a lager. So that was kind of the cart before the horse, or the horse before the wagon.
Yeah. You mentioned too, and we talked about it with the main 6 taps, that you've had some outside influence with naming the beer. There was a lager that was named through a contest, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. All right. The Leisure Suit
Larry, yes. Yeah, that was.
Who came up with that name?
He's asked me not to divulge it, which is really strange, because I don't think there's any. I can't see why he wouldn't want to be known for that, but.
Well, I know, like, the name is familiar to me, because if you grew up in the early mid-90s, it was the video game of Leisure Suit Larry, and you liked the game because it was a pretty crude one, especially for teenage boys, right?
And I think that's maybe why he's...
Why do you we're going to admit it right now. If you were a teenager in the 90s, you played Leisure Suit Larry, and you know exactly why you played Leisure Suit Larry.
No, that's exactly right. And I think he's in a position now where he probably shouldn't be associated with stuff like that.
Well, perhaps, but what we do, as teenagers,
your past is your past.
We talked a little bit about how the Honey Brown has some local influence. I think one of the other ones that did have local ingredients, was it the Don't Be Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah, the Czech lager that we brewed. Okay. Yeah, we had some organic black barley from Eugene Labant from his farm there, and that was another one that. I had that name. I was always going to brew a dark beer and have that name, just because of the fact that I didn't realize how many people come in here and they're basing their beer choices on the color of the beer.
Right.
And for a lot of people, the only dark beer they've ever had was Guinness.
Right.
So they're associating all dark beers taste like Guinness.
Yeah.
So I wanted to brew Czech lager, so it's a nice, smooth, easy drinking beer. And we did it a couple times. We even did a taste test, a blind taste test, where people would be blindfolded, and I'd have them drink the Czech lager, and then I'd have them drink a regular lager, and a lot of them couldn't tell the difference.
Right.
So that's the name. Don't be afraid of the dark. I wanted just to get that across, that you don't judge a beer by its color always.
Right. I always thought too, wasn't there a TV show as well? No, that was Are You Afraid of the dark? It's like another one going back to my teen years. Sorry, my mind wanders sometimes. So, all right, where was I on this one? Okay, a couple of my favorites that have been up. I'm going to start with the Dude Abides. That was the double IPA.
Double IPA, yeah. I'm a big Lebowski fan.
Okay,
so that we had to get that involved somehow, and it was just
the dude.
Yeah, the dude, exactly. The Dude Abides. That was one that was in my phone for a long time. I literally have, like I said, 100 more. So I've got more names than I have beer.
Why did you associate it with a double IPA, or it was just time to release?
It was just time. Yeah, it was just time for a Lebowski themed beer. Yeah.
Okay. How about the Bruce Lee 1-inch chest punch?
Again, I'm a Bruce Lee fan, and for those of you who don't have no idea what I'm talking about, just Google it. He's the master of the 1-inch chest punch.
Right.
Again, that was a high alcohol beer, so it should give you a punch.
A little bit of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I had even had to get a Bruce Lee costume for the video promotion, and haven't brought it out since.
This was a smartly named one. I'm talking about the hemp ale.
Yeah, no, that was
Smoke on the Water
Smoke
hemp ale.
on the Water hemp ale. Yeah.
So an homage to your musical taste as well.
Yeah.
Was that Deep Purple?
Deep Purple. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny you say that, because that wasn't necessarily my favorite song, but every time it comes on the radio, it brings back a flashback. And this was a long time ago. First year university, 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night, studying, or supposed to be studying, listening to K97.
Yeah.
And they have a contest on the radio, and they it's name this. They say a couple lyrics, and you got to phone in and name the song. 2 a.m. Nobody's phoning in. So I finally phoned in because I recognized it was Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water. And,
right on.
The funny thing is, again, 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and probably in February, and 3 people from St. Paul either phone me the next day, or when I run into them, tell me, hey, I heard you on the radio. So, and they weren't studying.
What was the next one? Oh, okay. Oh, no, I was going to ask one other thing. With hemp ale, I was always curious. I know a lot of the flavors and the that come out of ales is through the hops. But when you say hemp ale, is
yeah, we had and we had to, when I looked into it, I was just going to get some local hemp, but AGLC said absolutely not. I had to buy my hemp from the federal government.
Oh, wow.
And it was certified to have 0 THC in it.
Right.
Which I think a lot of people were disappointed in. But so I've had hemp seed that we put into the mash, and then hemp flour that we added to the boil, and it gave it, honestly, I've never really tasted a hemp ale that I wanted to have again, but this gave it a kind of an earthy taste. And
I remember. Yeah, that was one of my. I don't know what I want, so I'll grab the hemp ale one.
Okay,
and it always seemed to do the trick. This one near and dear to my heart, just because of the name itself, the Beer League Legend, because I fancy myself as such.
Well, and this is a shout out to Paul Desaulniers.
Okay,
because back in the day, when I played for the Lavoie Hotel Shooters, if we were ever short, we had that 9:15 or 9:30 ice time on a Monday night, and I swear that Paul would be every night of the week he'd be sitting at his door with his hockey bag and his shoes on, ready to go, because it didn't matter what night of the week you needed a player. Yeah, Paul was there.
I think he still is to an extent. Yeah, he hasn't slowed down a whole lot.
Yeah, well, that was an ode to him.
Yeah. No, that's good to know. Actually, I didn't know that. Yeah. And I know Paul very well. Yeah. He works around the dealership at St. Paul Dodge quite a bit. They're doing dealer transfers, or we're short staffed. He'll come in and wash vehicles and stuff. Likes to keep busy there. So a little bit off of the radar with we're talking beer this, beer that, but there's been a couple brews here that are not beers, and they're the hard seltzer fad, I guess, has been through the last couple of years, and you brewed a couple of those. You call it the Black Paw.
Well, we couldn't call it White Claw. So.
Of course.
The next best thing to White Claw is a Black Paw.
Way to stay off that infringement problem.
Exactly.
So you had a couple of those, the mango and the blackberry hard seltzers. I think they did very well in the summers as well.
Yeah.
And speaking of one that did very well, I think was a surprise, but the name is just kind of uncharacteristic of what we've been talking about, is the hard iced tea.
It's, we couldn't come up with anything for that. We thought we'd just keep it simple. And we're looking at maybe adding some flavors. So maybe we'll spruce up the name and spruce up the label.
I wonder if it's too late though, because sometimes simple is always better. Didn't you think it was just going to be kind of a couple batches and it would fizzle out?
When I had to submit my papers to AGLC, my plan, I said two or three batches in the summer, and then that'll be it. And I think we've done 18 batches, and I mentioned shutting it down for the fall, and I had an uproar from people. So we're buying more tea bags all the time.
So is this going to be permanently on the menu then?
I think we pretty much have to. Yeah, it's established, and it's a shame because you're right. The name is boring, the label is even more boring, and it comes in a milk jug. But people drink it.
Oh, and they love it, and I actually do too. It's not too sweet.
It
really is very refreshing as on a hot day. But yeah,
I drank a lot of it this summer and a lot less beer this summer.
Yeah.
And it's half the calories, I might add too.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Doesn't show on my belt line, but
maybe I got to switch over now. One of my favorites, and this is because of the TV show I love, and I don't know if everybody gets the reference to this Irish red ale that you brewed here just recently, the Swayze Express.
Yeah, again, another ode to an old TV show of mine, the Trailer Park Boys. Yeah. So no, that's.
So if anyone wants to fill in, one of the characters, Bubbles, goes to a train convention where it features a model train that was built by Patrick Swayze called the Swayze Express.
Using illegal parts.
Illegal parts, which they stole and used to cart their illegal product, across the Canada-U.S. border.
Yeah, no, I get a lot of questions about it. So you know who watches Trailer Park Boys and who doesn't. Yeah.
There was a Cossack ale you made once. I don't know if I ever tried this one, because this is a name I didn't recognize when I read it off the list that you had sent me.
That was a fundraiser, just a one-off fundraiser for Emil Shopka did a fundraising dinner earlier in the year when the war in Ukraine first started.
Okay.
So we donated, I think, about 300 bottles of it, and it's just a limited release, one-time thing, and it was actually really well received, and we raised a couple $1,000s with it. So. And
it's called Glory to Our Heroes Cossack Ale.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a cerveza in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a Mexican cerveza and a Mexican lager. Yeah, and I'm thinking, what can I call it? And I will admit I do use the Google every once in a while and see what other breweries are calling their Mexican lagers, and didn't see any. I had a couple names that I liked, but they had already been used.
Yeah. And
again, I'm going to sound like a TV geek here, but this goes back to an old X-Files episode where Fox Mulder is they're looking at these disappearances near the Mexican border, and the mention of this El Chupacabra, which is like a Mexican boogeyman, comes up. So that for some reason, that name, the El Chupacabra, just stayed in my head, and that's where that came from.
Seem fitting. Geez, I think we've gone through almost everything. Did I miss anything?
You got all the good ones. You missed an English ale.
Which one was that?
It's got a little bit of connection to St. Paul here. It's a former arcade in the...
Yes, you're right. Yeah. Actually, no, I have it on my list. I'm just overlooking it. And this one was a kind of a fun story too. I remember you telling, and this actually, when you told me where the name came up with, is what sparked the idea for this specific podcast. Because what a great story.
Well, and I consider Lakeland Brewing Company just a tiny regional brewery. So we're brewing for people basically in St. Paul and area. Yeah. So you got to have some connections other than the landing pad to our area here. Yeah. So again, Blue Mouse Arcade was a staple of anybody who grew up in the late 70s or 80s. I think that's when I was there. And we myself and all my friends, we spent every single penny that we could ever scrounge up in that arcade. And so I was brewing an English ale, and I thought, you know what? I had the Blue Moss Arcade name for a beer set for one of the beers, so it was time. So Blue Moss Arcade English Ale came about.
Perfect. And now there is a new beer that is on the verge. Well, by the time this podcast gets released, it will be in full service here. The newest to tap, number 8, Closet Bee Gees Fan Copper Lager.
This is another one that my wife Tanya came up with. As I've told you, it's a 7 or 8 hour process brewing beer. And if I don't get interruptions with my friends coming through the back door to drink beer, I'm by myself the whole time, usually. And I get bored, so I have playlists going on. I'm playing music, singing along. And my wife came one time, and I had the Bee Gees just blaring. Yeah. And she kind of stopped, and she looked at me, and I might have even been dancing, too. And she checked I didn't have a fever, and because there's some Bee Gees songs that they get in your head, and that they've got a good beat, and you can't not tap your foot to them.
Absolutely.
So this beer was brewed. It was 8 hours long straight of just me listening over and over again to like the best of the Bee Gees. Wow. So she's dubbed me a closet Bee Gees fan now. So it's out.
Because it's hard to admit that you're a Bee Gees fan, right?
You never do. No. I know there's people out there that are, but they won't admit it. Yeah.
Once again, Colin, this has been one of the most entertaining episodes I've had for a couple of reasons. I love the names. I love the beer. Can I make a request for a name?
Absolutely.
Can we come up with, next time you're thinking of something off the cuff, I know Pilsner's not as common but I was thinking maybe something like a nice, crisp, completely interesting podcast Pilsner.
Ooh. I'm grabbing my phone and I'm putting that in there, so it's on the list.
And you're welcome to tweak the name any way you want.
Sounds good.
One last thing, Colin. Now, so something we've been doing a little bit different since the last time you appeared on this podcast is we've had the guest come up with someone who you would find completely interesting that you would recommend for this show. And I'm not saying they have to come on, but if there was a name that comes to mind.
Oh, boy.
I know this would be a tough one for you because you seem to know everybody.
Boy, is it a cop-out if I say my wife? Because she is pretty interesting.
No.
She, I think she would be a good guest. She has 100% Ukrainian heritage, but over the years, she's become completely fluent in speaking Cree.
Right.
And she's used that, a lot and got a great relationship with all the Cree people in our area here. So I think she'd be a unique person to interview.
And a good choice, too, because she has been recommended by a couple people, both right on this podcast and then, just people on the sly saying, hey, have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? And I said, yes, I have. So definitely I think we will have to talk to her and see if she'd be comfortable coming on because there's been a couple people have mentioned her name. So I think it might be worth asking if she'd be okay with that.
When you approach her, can you make sure you mention I suggested her?
Okay. Once again, as always, a complete pleasure to sit down and have a beer and a discussion with someone completely interesting, my guest here at the Lakeland Brewing Company, Colin Porozni.
Lots of fun. Thank you, Ben.